Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, Jeanie Buss has given a rare interview. She had a lot to say, but how much of it will make Lakers fans feel better about the direction of the franchise? I know we still have some questions, and we'll unpack it all next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. We get this thing up for you as fast and as early as we can. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to find the show early. It always goes up a little earlier than the audio version. Plus, you get to look at us. And what's better than that, Andy? Nothing.
Well, the conversation that's coming, for sure. That's better.
I mean, we are that good looking. So I could understand if people would vote the other way. This was an unexpected thing that popped up on Tuesday afternoon. Bill Plaschke of the LA Times with a feature basically sitting down one-on-one with Lakers governor Jeanie Buss. We'll get to a lot of what she had to say to Bill Plaschke and covered a lot of ground from, responsibility inside the organization to the Rambi and accountability and all of these things. But honestly, I think one of the most notable parts of this, Andy, is that she did it at all. I think there was a recognition, and she says this in the interview, in the story with Bill, that, she needs to be out forward a little bit more. She needs to be out front a little bit more. And I agree with her. The communication, part of the reason there's so much frustration among fans, Andy, is the communication from the organization to the city, to the fan base, is terrible and has been for a few years.
Yeah, the exact quote is, I'm kind of like my dad, where it's kind of like, let the players, let the team be the focus, not me. But I get that I've been in kind of the background too much for people to understand what's going on. And she is correct. Dr. Buss was not a front and center owner in the slightest. He was a very high profile owner because he had a colorful lifestyle.
Social life.
Yes. Yeah, man about town.
Yes.
With a lot of companionship.
Probably knew a lot of people named Gabna. Hey, Gabna. Hey, Jerry, how are you?
He, if he were around now, he would know the TikTok generation. But
if he were around now, he'd be getting in a lot more trouble.
Yeah, I think if he were around now, actually, the lifestyle would change a lot.
Significantly.
But it doesn't change the fact that he was somebody that was very good about letting ownership. Letting the front office do its thing, giving the players space, and not being somebody like Jerry Jones or Mark Cuban or somebody where it felt like the owner was a personality because they wanted it to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that really works best when things are going well.
Ding, 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 ding.
If things are not going well, and we saw this a few years ago during the the last really high profile, bad, chaotic period for the Lakers when Luke Walton was fired, Magic Johnson unexpectedly resigned, and they went way too long not addressing this publicly. They went until Frank Vogel's introductory press conference. But even before that, there were a few months where it would have been good for Rob Pelinka to do some type of State of the Union press conference. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, look, you're not going to get all the answers that you want, and you're probably not going to get all the transparency that you want. But at least it feels like we are here. We are in front of you. We will take some questions, and we will let you know we're listening.
And we sound like Frasier.
I feel like I sound like Succession. Remember,
right.
We were trying.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
We hear you.
Oh, too much bore on the floor. So I think the big thing that you mentioned there is you can do that when things are going well. Dr. Buss came out in public and did stuff, made statements, got in front of the team in times when it was necessary, in moments where the Lakers were struggling more. And They didn't have a lot of them back then. They didn't have a stretch like they've had over the last decade with this group. And you know, I think ultimately Jeannie's instinct is correct, but I think they've overcorrected. And it's rule number one of narrative making is if you don't control it, somebody else will control it for you. And it's just they have to do a better job, particularly when times are bad, when there are a ton of questions, and it's the hardest time to come out and do this stuff. That's when you got to get out there and answer questions. And
well, I think it's also
I was just to finish my thought, like that to me was one of the most positive aspects, even before I got into the content of what she said, some of which I thought was excellent, some of which I had a couple questions about, was just that this interview and this story from Plaschke exists is a positive step, I think, for the Lakers and their relationship with Lakers fans and frankly, the rest of the league, because everybody else got questions too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unusual. I remember this period that I was just describing before, the last time things were bad. Jeannie went out and did a bit of the rounds, and she was out in public and did a few interviews. And actually, a couple of these I may end up addressing over the course of this conversation. So it's not unheard of. And the thing is, Jeannie, when she is completely confident in herself and, confident in what she's going to say, she's really good at this stuff because she's very likable. She's very charismatic. She's very smart. She's good at this sort of thing. Like there was a period where for a while, Jeannie was kind of the front-facing. She was really the highest ranking front-facing person with any type of voice because Laker fans liked her. And I think it was often very reassuring for fans to hear from her.
Right. Well, your choices,
and the role changed now. It's different.
Right. And at the time, you had Dr. Buss, who, really from a health standpoint, really couldn't be out in front as much anymore. And then your other options
weren't putting Jim out there.
No, your other options, about to say, your other options were Jim, who it's just a terrible idea to put him in front of any, even when he wasn't wrong. He just was so unpopular. And then, hey guys, Mitch Kupchak, who's just not a great person, wonderful human, not exactly a stirring orator. Let's get into some of the meat of what she had to say. Plenty of stuff to go through in this story, and we'll start doing that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Athletic Greens. I started taking AG1 because I'm somebody who's always trying to find different ways to improve my health, more vitamins, improve my immune system, better digestion. But it's like I don't have time to do all these different things separately, and that's what makes Athletic Greens and AG1 perfect for me. Just one scoop of AG1, whether in a glass of water or in a smoothie, you get 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole-sourced superfoods, probiotics, adaptogens, which I didn't even know was a thing.
Didn't know.
You get it all in one shot. Works for every single dietary lifestyle under the sun. Athletic Greens was a company created because their founder was dealing with these gut health issues, and he ended up on this regimen of supplements that was really complicated. It cost him $100 a day. And he decided there has to be a better way because honestly, $100 a day, I'll roll the dice on really crappy health. But he came up with a solution that costs less than $3 a day. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NBA network. Again, athleticgreens.com/NBA network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
Let's start with, we kind of work our way through this. I would say if there's a quote in here that's probably going to get the most attention, and I've seen it even already on Twitter a little bit. It's one where Jeannie talks about the season and the payroll and all that stuff. She says, and this again to Bill Plaschke, "I'm growing impatient because we have the 4th highest payroll in the league. When you spend that kind of money on the luxury tax, you expect to go deep in the playoffs. So yeah, it was gut-wrenching for me to go out on a limb like that," meaning I assume the Westbrook trade, "and not get the results we were looking for. I'm not happy. I'm not satisfied." It's a clunky way of phrasing it, but I get what she's getting at, I think. And I think a lot of people are going to latch onto the, I am boo-hooing because this was really expensive for me and we didn't even make the playoffs. And there's certainly some of that in there. I mean, like, this stuff's expensive. It costs a lot of money. But I took it to mean as much as like we went out and made big investments and we did a lot of aggressive stuff and put some things together and spent a lot of money to do it. And we failed miserably. And it's really disappointing. And like, in some ways, the payroll is shorthand for the investment that we made, the broad investment that we made.
Well, look, as much as nobody's ever going to react well to what feels like boohooing from the billionaire class, the reality is, as the owner of a team, when you have this type of payroll, and look, I've said this before, as much as I think the Lakers at times let finances get in the way of the best possible decisions, you can look at, first and foremost, not retaining Alex Caruso, which clearly was
right. And that from a roster, so I actually think I don't mean to cut you off. But in terms of frugalness, I think it hurts them more in the coaching staff and the support staff
wherever
and places like that. I mean,
sure.
It's not just the payroll. And
absolutely. And what I think is really, I would love to know more specifically is when she talks about going out on a limb, whether she means purely the finances like we're discussing right now, or if she means going out on a limb with signing off on the Westbrook deal to begin with, which created, not just financial implications in and of themselves, but poor results. Was like, that's something that she had reservations about to begin with, but she listened to LeBron, AD, Rich Paul, Rob Pelinka, some combination of important people. Or like, look, I went out on a limb spending like this, and we ended up with an 11 seed for my troubles. And guess what? That is humiliating, particularly when you're the Lakers, because everybody's always looking to take their shots. So there could be a lot of different ways that she defines going out on a limb with this. And none of them are necessarily wrong. They can be revealing in different ways. I would just love to know what they were.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all of it. I think she did go out on a limb with, and I if she had reservations about the Westbrook deal, and we'll get into this when we talk probably a little bit more when we talk about what she had to say about accountability, ultimate accountability in around the organization. But in the same way that probably a lot of fans were like, Russell Westbrook, explain this one to me. But she listened to her basketball people who came and said, this is what we think is the right idea. And, the LeBron was on board, Rob Pelinka was on board. I don't have a problem with that. Like, that is what she's supposed to do, because she's not a basketball person. She is supposed to hire people, listen to their advice, and then decide if they're doing a good job and fire them if they're not. But she did go out on a limb with that. And the organization went out on a limb, and they spent a lot of money and they did all that. And I think if you can get past I don't mean you. I mean people listen. I feel she has every right and every reason.
It's a crappy return on investment.
Yes, to feel angry about this, because the other thing that comes through, regardless, throughout the whole interview, is she good at her job? Is she not good at her job? Has she grown into it? She deeply cares about the fortune of the team. She wants the team to be good. And I think
the fortune, literally and figuratively.
Right. But I mean, she is.
And she's allowed to care about the literal fortune. All owners do.
Yes, they do. And so that part of it was just, it's to hear her talk about it. Like, yeah, this was a big swing. And we took on a lot as an organization, from the business side to do this. And man alive, was it a spectacular fail. And it's unacceptable. And I think that gets into the accountability question, which is the next thing that she had to say. And I am controlling, this is a quote in the story, I am controlling owner of the Los Angeles Lakers. I am held accountable for every decision that's made here. I think, to me, like, okay, you signed off on the Westbrook deal because your basketball people told you that was what you should do.
Or she liked it herself.
Maybe she did. I assume she didn't overrule them is all I'm saying. Like they were like, no, we got this, Buddy Hield thing. It's perfect. And she's like, wait, but we can get Westbrook. Go do that. Assuming she didn't overrule her basketball people, then it's the basketball people who make the decisions. My question now is, what do you do going forward? Who do you hold accountable? When do you hold them accountable? And certainly in the story, she talks about, improvement that needs to be made, or people will be held accountable. And Plaschke certainly seems to imply that, Pelinka and his crew have this year, summer and into the season, to get it right.
I'm, first of all, just happy to hear her voice the idea that she's held accountable for every decision that's made there, because it's another way of saying that she is the ultimate shot caller and that she has a voice in all of this too, because there have been times where I have felt like, and this was maybe more prevalent during the time when Jeanie was the ultimate shot caller, but Jim Buss was the highest ranking basketball guy along with Mitch Kupchak. And she would, I think, very actively separate herself from that process in ways that was very self-serving. So I'm happy to see her remove that buffer in a way that I think is appropriate. The part, though, that I think is really interesting is when she said, quote, "I will make the hard decisions," this being if they continue not to live up to their standards, because that's what you have to do. How hard decisions are defined here is a big question, Brian, because it would be one thing to fire Rob Pelinka,
which I think she would.
Right. But that's one thing in and of itself, because all the connections that Pelinka's had to this organization with Kobe and what he represents.
Mm-hmm.
But would she fire the husband, Kurt Rambis, of her best friend, Linda Rambis? And Kurt being one of her close friends anyway, like how much house cleaning would be involved? And here's another thing that I have no idea what the answer is here, but would Jeanie ever be reluctant to elevate Jesse and Joey Buss to an even higher role, not because of anything necessarily wrong with them? And the two of them have a lot of respect, I think, both locally and around the league. I know the impressions we've had of Joey and the few conversations we've had with him, we were very impressed by him. But she's been through the layers of complications that come with having your family this deeply involved.
Right. And so what, if I elevate them and things go wrong, what happens? What do I do?
Again, in a completely separate context that was with Jim. Like, I don't think she suspects Joey and Jesse are idiots the way she clearly suspected
but how
Jim
many?
was.
There are like 3 GMs in the league who don't get fired,
Right?
At some point, like they all get fired. They all get, so that's a really interesting point. Like, let's stick on this for a second, because she also talked about Kurt. She talked about Linda, and these are all kind of interrelated, and it gets to the types of people that they have relationships with in total as well. So we'll do all that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Built Bar. Summer's coming. You got parties to hit. You got the kids in camp. You are going to be running all over the place like a madman, and you're going to need some food on the go. And Built Bars are the perfect snacks to take with you on family vacations. Put them in the kids' backpack. You can make sure everybody is fueled for the summer adventures. And the best part about Built Bars, they are healthy and they taste awesome. All the Built Bars and the Puffs, the protein-infused marshmallows, they're covered in 100% chocolate, so you can eat healthy but actually enjoy it. And with the Puffs, for example, they got awesome flavors like banana cream pie or even churro, which sounds like pretty awesome for a protein bar. You can order a mixed box that comes with 12 flavors with bars and Puffs. Like, some of the bars include banana cream pie, raspberry, double chocolate. They're always coming up with new and cool and unique flavor combinations. And here's the best part. Most Built Bars, they only contain about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, but 17 grams of protein. And that's what you actually want. Compare that to a candy bar. Those are usually around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, like countless net carbs. It's ridiculous. Don't even get me started.
Infinite amount of net carbs.
Oh yeah. They're the infinity stones of net carbs. And it's obvious the direction you should go. So go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Again, promo code LOCK15, 15% off at built.com.
So this question of accountability is an interesting one. And you're right. Like, I'd never not thought of that issue with Jesse and Joey and some of that stuff. Like, this is part of the problem of running your business like essentially a family business where everybody is connected in some way to the
family or extended family.
Right. If you, and I use that for people who are literally related to you, as they have in there, and people who are figuratively related to you. It's like Magic Johnson and some of these people who might as well be family.
Phil Jackson, the Rambi.
It is an interesting question. Like, would she? I absolutely believe she would fire Rob, and I think will fire Rob if the Lakers don't improve significantly this year. But the other half of the basketball operation is Kurt. Like, that's the only other person anybody ever hears about. And I wouldn't necessarily expect her to fire Linda, because at least in theory, and Jeanie kind of pushed back pretty hard on the notion that Linda Rambis is making basketball decisions. You're talking about another word that is, I think, open to interpretation of what exactly that means. But yeah, if you fire Rob, you can't fire Rob and not fire Kurt, or at least remove Kurt's influence in basketball decision making. Would she do that? I don't know.
I mean, these things are really complicated. I think a lot of people would say, unnecessarily complicated, self-inflicted complications, and that role of Linda, because I want to make it clear, because when I talked about this some on Twitter at Cam Brothers, and raised the question from Jeanie's quote where she said, in terms of Linda Rambis, she does not have a role in the basketball department. Her role is, as it's always been the last 40 years, as my advisor. She and I have worked together for years and years and years. Why that has become an issue for people, I don't understand.
And the one specific thing that he pointed to, that was pointed to in the article, that she pointed to in the article, was like, for example, Linda, when we acquire new players, helps them sort of the onboarding process, help you find a place to live, help you get ready for schools, help you do all that stuff that you might. Every organization has at least one or two people like that.
Right. And these are valuable things.
Yes. And that's one of the things that Jeanie pointed to, that Linda does. It cannot possibly be the only thing that Linda does. And it's still very vague. Advisor to me,
right,
is a vague thing.
And this gets to why, and Jeanie is a really smart person. So the idea that she doesn't understand this, I simply don't buy, because just her involvement with the basketball department, and this is something that has been disputed for whatever it's worth, the lack of clarity matters in terms of what she is actually advising Jeanie on to begin with. This lack of clarity matters because Kurt Rambis, we know, is heavily involved with basketball decisions, and Linda presumably would like Kurt, her husband, to keep his job. So therefore, the potential for conflict of interest is possible, if not definite. And also what I think jumps out at me is, this is not the first time Jeanie has had, forget that she could clarify this whenever she wanted to. In previous interviews, she has had the opportunity to clarify exactly what it is that Linda does, she advises Jeanie on. There was a couple interviews after the Magic fiasco where there was one, she was on a red carpet for some event, and she said, quote, "There, being the Rambises, have been a part of the Lakers surrounding me. Linda Rambis and I have worked the exact same way for the last 30 years. Nothing's changed, but for whatever reason, there's things people want to hear about. They're part of our team, and they do a fantastic job." Later that year with Petros and Money on AM 570 Fox affiliate, quote, "Linda is my trusted advisor and somebody that has seen so much in the business. When people start paying attention to our relationship, that to me smelled a little sexist." And like, no, I'm sorry. Like I, for example, I pushed back somebody on Twitter who said to me, the only advice Linda Rambis should be providing is what they should have for lunch. No, like BS. That I'm not looking to delegitimize Linda Rambis as somebody with knowledge.
Could very well have excellent business acumen on how to run a franchise like the Lakers and the things that need to be done around the franchise. She's not
this specific setup with Kurt Rambis there and the organization being so insular to begin with. That's why clarification would be helpful. And every time Jeanie doesn't clarify this, it leads people to, at minimum, wonder why not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, I think the idea that and we've talked to people about this, and I think I think the general tenor of what everybody is confusion of like not it could because what is a basketball decision, and we don't need to jump into the rabbit hole that, but just I think it's fair to say most people would agree what constitutes a basketball decision is something that is going to be defined by different people in different ways. And I don't think Linda is in the room going, guys, we need to sign Kent Bazemore as opposed to this guy. And what do you think about this trade? Like, I don't
She's
think
not
that's what
breaking
she's
down
doing.
film.
No, I don't think that's what she's doing. What I do think she's probably doing is empowering Kurt. And so is that a basketball decision? I don't even know what that looks like exactly in the day to day, but it does, like you say, creates a bit of a conflict.
There are fewer than 6 degrees of separation in the scenario you're talking about, 2 basketball decisions.
Sure.
I mean, that's just obvious.
It's just, and so like when I think it gets to part of the frustration, I don't want to personally, I don't want to kind of make this interview about that because I think overall, this was a very positive thing that she did. And I think to have this story out there, to try to at least give some understanding of what both the expectations are for this year, what she sees her role as, who is in charge, and what the consequences of another season like we just went through will be for people who make basketball choices. I think in the aggregate, if I'm a Lakers fan, I feel better for having her speak and having read this, even if there are individual things in it that I, wish she wasn't so defensive about, or wish that she would explain a little bit more in detail. Like, for example, what exactly does Linda Rambis do? That's not insignificant, but at the same time, there's a lot of positive stuff in here too.
It's not insignificant though, but I do think it's connected to the insular factor of this organization. Like, for example, she talks about still leaning on Magic Johnson for advice, and she acknowledged, like, yes, the way he left me high and dry, I would have preferred he did a different way, but at the end of the day, he and I have a long-standing relationship that goes back decades. There's obviously an emotional trust and a friendship, and all of that's great. What I would love to hear from her more often is just something to the degree of like, yes, Magic left abruptly, and that was a problem. But at the end of the day, he's Magic Johnson, one of the best authorities on basketball we'll ever see, an incredible mind, and I trust his evaluation skills as opposed to what feels like I trust him personally.
Right, but I mean, I think you could argue, and I certainly would, that that's implied. She trusts him personally
not after the way she saw Magic do his job. No, I don't think that should be. If that's implied, I think that's a problem.
Well, that's different. I think the larger issue with Jeanie is just quality control. I mean, like in terms of who you're getting your advice from. Magic,
it just feels like that to me for her is quality control. Do I trust you on a personal level? That's quality control. That's quality control for your personal relationships. It's not necessarily quality control for your organizational relationships.
Sure. I just feel like the in this particular instance, I feel like, her trust in Magic as a person to lean on about basketball stuff is related to him being Magic Johnson, and having, knowledge of the game and all that other stuff. I just think that he's the wrong guy to lean on because his track record in that stuff is actually very poor. They need a stronger organizational structure. The problem with Magic, the problem with Phil, the problem is they're not really, I think we brought this up last week. When you have too many people who are not in the organization, who have significant voices in the organization, it makes it very hard to have a structure that your organizational people can work in. It makes Rob's job harder. Rob's job is already hard enough. There are a lot of good questions as to whether Rob is good at his job, even when the circumstances are made easier. Don't make it harder. And so stuff like that, like just sort of org chart stuff, is a shortcoming of the franchise. And I don't think now that is something I don't think is going to change. The last thing that I wanted to mention, and it shouldn't surprise people, she's not selling team. the franchise is not going to be sold. The family is not going to sell. If you are a person at home or in your car or out on a walk, hoping that, another couple seasons of badness and they'll just ditch it and sell. They're not doing that. And so, Jeanie Buss is your governor going forward, and balance, I guess, her deep and obvious love for the Lakers and Lakers fans with the questions about how good she is at running the organization. It's a fascinating time.
Yeah, the last thing I would say is just it's a reminder that her job is hard.
It's like very hard.
It's really Jeanie Buss, when she was in charge of business ops, was by all accounts I had ever heard, whether again in LA or around the league, she's really good at it. Like really, really good at it and very respected for it. This is such a different role for her. And, this decade has been a reminder of it at times. They won a championship with her as the ultimate shot caller, and you can never take that away. But other times it's been very easy to question whether or not she's actually in the right role right now. And it's not because she isn't a capable person. It's just, it's hard.
It's a really hard
different
job.
It's very different, though, also from what she was doing before.
Okay, so I'm sure it probably won't be the end of the chatter about this, though. Thursday, though, a really fun episode set up for you already. Andy, you'll never guess who has rocketed to the top of the odds of who the Lakers are going to coach, the next coach of the Lakers, Terry Stotts. And we just happen to have an interview with Mike Richman of Locked On Blazers, breaking down what it might look like if Terry Stotts was, in fact, the next head coach of the Lakers. So that's one of the interviews we've got lined up for you. That'll be Thursday. We've got a lot of great stuff as well coming down.
We're going to be talking with Jeff Pearlman about Winning Time. And he was the author of the book that all of this was based on. I want to talk.
Yeah, somebody actually said on the YouTube comments, can you get somebody from Winning Time? How about Jeff Pearlman? He is Winning Time.
Yeah, exactly. We want to get his thoughts on just sort of what this whole experience was like for him. And also he's somebody that knows Lakers history inside and out. So he's going to have a lot of opinions about just where we are right now.
We were talking about with Jeanie on today's show. So plenty of stuff to look forward to. Remember, Locked On Lakers on YouTube, and we will see everybody Thursday with Mike Richman from Locked On Blazers.